So we are so fortunate today to have Katie Anderson with us. Katie Anderson is an internationally recognized leadership consultant, coach, professional speaker, and learning enthusiast, dedicated to helping purpose-driven leaders create cultures of learning and accelerate individual and organizational impact. Katie is the author of the best-selling book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, which has received multiple international awards, including the prestigious Shingo Publication Award, and has been translated into over 8 languages. Katie is also the host of the Transformational Leadership podcast, Chain of Learning. We are so lucky to have Katie with us here today. So without further ado, I'll pass it to you, Katie.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be back again at the Results Washington conference. It's always a joy to be here to share knowledge and answer questions live. And for those of you watching too, feel free to reach out with other questions after this session. I'm going to get started by sharing my slides. We're going to have an interactive session, even though it's in this webinar format. So get ready with your chat open, because I'm going to be asking you for reflections. And I'm also going to be using a tool called Mentimeter to build some word clouds based on your feedback and experience as well. So I'll have both QR codes and links that will be dropping into the chat so you can do some easy access. So get ready to learn, to reflect, and to engage here together. All right. So, as we talked about today, we're really here to talk about how you can transform your influence to become an even more effective change leader in your organization, and how you can pair your technical lean skills with the influence and people skills needed to really create an effective continuous improvement organization. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what this acronym Katalyst means and how it can apply to you. But so before we get started, or as we're getting started, I want to know who is here and what your role is. So we have a Zoom poll. So this is the one time we're going to use the Zoom poll. So what is your role? And we broke this into a few different categories. If you're an internal change practitioner, either using lean, agile, process improvement methodologies, whatever, a manager of an internal change team, or an senior internal change leader, operation manager or director, a senior leader in your organization, an external consultant, or others. So let us know what your role is. All right. Hi, Jared. Thanks for your comment. All right. So can we see the results of the poll? All right. So the results of the poll is 36% of people who responded said that you're internal change practitioners in your organization. 5% are managers of internal change teams. 11% are operational managers or directors. 2%, so 7 of you are senior leaders, either VP or C-suite, and we have just a few external consultants, and then we have 45%, which are other. So I'd be really curious, if you're in other role, can you drop in the chat like what your role is? I'm just curious on what those different categories are, so that when we come back next year, we can even have some more refined categories that captures that 45% of you. So drop that in, and we can put that in there. Okay, so there's a lot of, that's super helpful. So we'll do some PDCA for next year and have some more information on who's here. But no matter what your official role is in your organization, you are in the right place, because regardless if you're, an individual contributor, you are a manager, a leader, or someone who's a change leader, you need to master influence skills to really have impact, because when we work in organizations, we are working with people. And so we can't just have the technical skills or the expertise we've developed in whatever our field is, whether it's IT or business or Lean and Six Sigma methodologies. It's about how we then bring people along to create a really high-performing, people-oriented organization where people's thinking is then contributing to the outcomes. So maybe if you have a vision for change, but you're discouraged because sometimes you can't get buy-in from executives or what they need to do to build a culture of learning, you're definitely in the right place. Or if you love solving problems in your organization, hands up, I love solving problems, but are frustrated because the changes don't seem to stick, or you're exhausted from solving the same problem year after year. And that is so true, especially in operations. How often do you find yourself working on the same problem? It doesn't seem to go away. You're in the right place. And if you are seen as like the tools and projects person, no matter what you're doing, like you're just working on projects or applying tools, but not really growing into this influencer that you know you can be, or creating the results and impact that you want, you're definitely in the right place. Because we're going to talk about some of these core skills that will help you continue to grow in your career and in your impact, and really create the results and outcomes that you want to be seeing in your organization. So, hi everyone, I'm Katie Anderson. I already got the wonderful introduction here, and I would love to connect with all of you on LinkedIn. So please reach out and continue the conversation afterwards. And I'm going to tell a little bit more of my backstory to really how I've come to now be working with global companies around the world to help you and them and their leaders really understand what it takes from a leadership and from a people perspective to create a high-performing organization. I write in Forbes and Industry Week. We already mentioned my book, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more insights about, and I have my podcast too. But really, what's more important than all of this is how I see my purpose. And this is a drawing that I do in workshops or leadership sessions, and I've actually distilled it down to the core part of my purpose, which is, and this is a very poorly drawn globe, but the heart here in the middle is the San Francisco Bay Area where I'm at right now. It's near where I grew up. My mom still lives in the house that I grew up, 20 minutes away from where my family, my two sons and my husband and I live. I've lived in 7 countries, and something that's really been important to me is always staying connected with people and always learning. And I've come to realize that my purpose is about connecting the hearts and minds of people around the world so that we together can make it a better place. And that's why I accepted the invitation from Results Washington again to be here, because this is about me fulfilling my purpose and connecting with you and learning from and with you together, so how we can really lead transformational change, not just in our individual organizations, but looking across our organizations to connect together, and really, truly how we can create a sustainable, happier world together. So what we're going to cover today is, what is this Katalyst change leader? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Some of the 3 common mistakes that might be keeping you in a doer trap. And then I'll be exploring the 8 competencies of the Katalyst model that you need to master to move from being a continuous improvement practitioner, regardless if that's your role or if you are someone just passionate about continuous improvement and operational excellence, to truly becoming a transformational change leader. I'll have some tips for your practice, and I'll be asking you to set your intention for what you're going to do going forward. And we'll have some time at Q&A at the end. If you want to get more information about the Katalyst model and have a self-assessment, I do have this on my website, and I'll share this QR code multiple times. You can go to my website too, which is kbjanderson.com/Katalyst with a K. So we'll drop that in the chat later as well. All right, so we all are familiar with the word catalyst. You learned it at least in high school or growing up, and it's defined as an event or a person that accelerates the rate of change, or someone or something who encourages progress or change. And it's that agent that drops into the science experiment, what really explodes things and makes things going. I was thinking about this word catalyst when I was just 2 weekends ago at this Maker Faire science fair, and they were doing this huge experiment for the kids, dropping in a catalyst into this big vat of chemicals, and it was like exploding out foam and foam and foam that was going everywhere. And we really want to be that as well in our organization. How are we accelerating the rate of change? And many of you might be familiar with the word kata. It's now been associated with Mike Rother's work, the Toyota kata. And my time living in Japan, which I'll share more about, I got obsessed about learning about some of the Japanese words. Not that you have to be speaking Japanese, but you'll see a lot of Japanese things here because of my time living in Japan. But kata is a word that means routine or practice. It's really the behaviors that put together create a habit or create proficiency. It's often used in martial arts as the different routines that you're going to learn to put together. And I wanted to mash up this word catalyst and katalyst, or you could just say catalyst, and thinking about the routines and practices that we need to have to really accelerate the rate of learning and scientific thinking in our organization. So I like to think of a catalyst is, if we take that learning mindset, it's an event or person that accelerates the rate of scientific thinking and improvement in our organizations, or someone or something who encourages learning as the source of progress or change. And as I learned from working with Toyota leader Isao Yoshino for the last decade and writing his 40 years of, of learnings from Toyota in my book, I was really curious to understand what's the secret to Toyota's success. What we know of as lean came from the Toyota production system, and so many companies, yours or organizations, yourselves included, are really trying to leverage these concepts to make your work and your organization better. And he kept saying, there's no secret to Toyota, except that he said, except it's their attitude towards learning. And so this is where if we can have the behaviors that encourages learning as the source of progress or change, that's really how we're going to transform our organizations and get more results. And this requires us to not just have the technical skills to improve processes, but the social and relational skills to really bring an organization of people together to do that. So I have another question for you, and we're going to open this up to a word cloud. In your experience, whatever your role is, what makes leading change hard for you? What in your experience makes it hard? And then I'm going to open up the word cloud in a moment. So go over, you can scan the QR code. We'll drop the link in the chat, or you can go over to menti.com and use the code that's there below. All right, and I'm going to stop my sharing here and go over to the word cloud so you can see how it's coming up. One moment. All right, so you're seeing all the words, so be sure to get in here. Wow, the biggest word is resistance. Yep, there's buy-in comes in multiple times, buy-in dash and buy-in not. Change, fear, resistance, pushback, lack of buy-in, the unknown, closed mindsets, existing org structures. Oh my gosh, no matter where I go in the world, all these things are consistent about it's hard, but like that resistance, fear, getting buy-in, time, communication, conflict, these are all relational and influence situations or problems that we need to help figure out how to get over. It's not so much the technical side, it's the human side. And so this is why having these skills as being catalysts about having our ability to help manage this is going to be so important. And we'll be sure to share this word cloud with everyone at the end. So feel free to keep going in, but there's a lot of consistency here in what you're saying. All right, I'm going to share go back to the presentation. Okay, so yes, all of this is so true, and we have this experience with ourselves as well. So how can we better not only improve process, but bring people along and manage the people situations and issues that we have? So I, like you, love solving problems, and I actually had a first career working in academia in healthcare policy. I have my master's in public health and thought I was going to be a researcher and a professor and, help work at the policy level in government agencies and in academia. So I really understand the nonprofit and government and academic sectors. But when I moved to Australia for a few years, and when I came back to California in my early 30s, I got a job at Stanford Children's Hospital in their performance improvement department. And I actually dug up a few photos of me from back in those days, which was really hard to do because I had, a digital camera by then, but, it's not like today where everything was like in the cloud. And so I really had to go digging and there weren't so many photos. But here are me back in the day leading rapid process improvement workshops and value stream events. And I loved it. I loved it. And I grew in seniority over 6 years at Stanford Children's and then took a more senior role reporting to the COO of a large healthcare organization. And it was the first time I was really managing a larger team of improvement professionals. And I was coaching the executive team on the behaviors that they needed to have to really run the organization. And I loved the solving the problems. And I knew my role was not just to be doing all the doing, but to really help grow and teach and develop people. But what I didn't realize was that my habits were so ingrained of being this master problem solver. And it was only when I had a coach who came and helped me, she made me realize or helped me realize that the routines that I was showing up with were not in alignment with the impact that I wanted to have. And when I'm on key stages, I share this story about how one day I had Margie, who I'll share a picture of in a moment, come to the organization to be working with my team about how we're effectively coaching for A3 thinking or problem solving thinking. And then I asked her to follow me through the day in my coaching with executive leaders and then my team as well. And you can picture this was back in 15 years ago. We had the open floor plan with all the sticky notes behind us and all the sheets and all the colored markers and everything, a real process improvement specialist dream. And I was there with my team, there to check in on the status of all our work. And Margie was there sitting in the back, kind of like the National Geographic, show where she's sort of recording everything and just watching. And we're like the animals at the watering hole on the Serengeti. And everything was going great until suddenly, out of nowhere comes the lion. And I didn't even realize what was going on. And it was only when I went back afterwards and asked Margie for some feedback. She's like, Katie, you were like a lion in this situation. You were jumping on and attacking people, not out of malice or, ill will, but you were interrupting and you were just kind of talking on them or sharing all your ideas, kind of pouncing on all the thinking without giving them space so much to be sharing their perspective or sharing their thinking. And I was like totally horrified to realize that I had been taking over so much of the meeting out of my high energy and my desire to be one of the doers. But in that role, what I was supposed to be doing is holding the space for my team to be sharing information. And it was a real transformational moment for me where I realized that even though I'd been developing a lot of the skills around facilitation and coaching, that I had some deeply ingrained habits that were not contributing to my true influence, either as a leader of my group and my team, or in coaching my executives. I often was saying, oh, I think. I'd ask one open-ended question, but then I would be sharing all of my thinking rather than holding the space for others to think. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more too, but pay attention if you're the lion as well and jumping in unintentionally and shutting down other people's thinking. I started my consulting practice about a year after that, and serendipity came into place. And my husband, for his job, got the opportunity for our family to move to Tokyo, Japan for 2 years. And I met Mr. Isao Yoshino, who was, as I mentioned, this 40-year Toyota leader. And he gave me his card and said, come look me up and I'll take you to Toyota City when you get there. So this is me just a few months after I moved to Japan, thinking that it was going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity to meet with this Toyota leader. And it became one of the most important adult relationships in my whole life. And so much of what I'm sharing here is just validated by his years of experience and wisdom at Toyota, not just what it takes to have great outcomes and value for your customer, but really to create this true people-centered learning organization. And I captured his wisdom and learning in my book. And there's just so much great knowledge in there. I've had the opportunity to talk with leaders like CEO of GE, Larry Culp, about what are the shifts he's had to make as an executive too, to become a more effective transformational change leader in his organization. And he said it was asking more questions and listening better and unlearning everything he'd learned about business and leadership that he had received in his MBA program. So it's sort of these mindset shifts we need to make. And again, then working with leaders like yourselves all around the world. And it's a pleasure for me, but it comes back from my own passion about how did I move from being this CI, continuous improvement professional, doing great work and improvements in the organization to really growing in the transformational change skills to become a much broader influencer in my organization, and now helping others like you as well do the same. And this is really about this concept of a chain of learning, how we're all going to connect with each other to learn and grow together. So my chain of learning, starting with Mr. Yoshino, who was the boss of John Shook, the former chairman of the Lean Enterprise Institute. And then he worked with Margie, who was my coach, and Margie worked with me. And here we all are connected. But it's not a linear chain. It's more like a mesh. So I encourage you too to think about, how are you growing your chain of learning in your organization? How are you growing, developing people and the connections? And it's not just one way. How are you learning from them, and how are they learning from you? And it's all about this concept of intention. I have these words written in Japanese behind me. This is the word intention in Japanese. And it comes from symbols representing heart and direction. And I see this as thinking about, what's our purpose? Who do we want to be, and what impact do we want to have? And then what are the behaviors that we need to take that really align with that? So what are the kata, the habits, the routines, the behaviors that are really going to enable us to achieve the impact that we want? And this gets back to those Katalyst skills. How do we develop not just the technical skills, but how do we have the relational skills as well? So think about this, and I want you to go into the chat too. You might be stuck in the doer trap, and I shared a few things that were keeping me in the doer trap as well. Are you the hero who loves to come in and saves the day? Like, there's the problem, and you're just running after it, almost like you're the firefighter putting out all the fires, and there's an adrenaline rush in there, and it's so exciting. And really, in our organizations, we often tend to reward the heroics of people who come in and use all their skills to save the day. But the challenge is, it's really not going to create sustainable change if we're always just jumping from fire to fire and putting it out. And so how do we recognize when that's happening and start becoming better fire preventers rather than firefighters? Second, are you the magician, maybe who's like waving your magic, you applying your Lean Six Sigma skills behind the scenes and sort of transforming the project or the results, but not really engaging the people who are on the team or the operational owners of it as well? So it's almost like you're taking the improvement and going behind the scenes and trying to figure things out. I know I was doing that because I love to solve problems. So I'd go in and assess what was going on, and then go back to my office and do some magic, and then, present some options for people. But the challenge in that is that we're also not bringing them along and teaching them. So how can you still, do your magic, but also not doing it behind the scenes, but really bringing people along? And then the third, that might be a role in which you're stuck into the doer trap, is being the pair of hands. And by pair of hands, I mean is someone who's actually literally doing the doing. You're maybe collecting all the data, or doing all the analysis, or putting up all the visual management. This is helpful to do and is sometimes needed, but when you are always doing the doing, you're not then teaching the group or the leaders how to do it themselves too. So when you end up doing it all, you end up owning all the responsibility for the problem solving and for the sustainability. So how about you? What role do you find yourself sometimes getting stuck in a doer trap? And what's the consequence, or how do you feel? I'd love to hear what what you think in the chat as well. Hero complex. Yeah. 3, tired. Yes. Overburdened, exhausted, pair of hands. Yes. A bit of it all. Yeah. And we're all doing this. Like, it's okay sometimes, but it's about recognizing, and that we're going to get stuck in that trap, and we're going to get overburdened by everything that we have to do. Oh yeah, I can't complete my actual assigned work. Yeah, you can't do the other things you need to do because you're doing it all for others. So thank you all for sharing. So let's get out of the doer trap and really step into that transformational change leadership. And when we talk about developing a learning organization, remember, the only secret to Toyota is its attitude towards learning, is we need a better balance between both technical problem solving skills and all the other expertise that you might have from a technical standpoint, and the social influence, coaching, and people-oriented skills. And too often we end up being like imbalanced, where we're focused much more on the tools and technical sides of continuous improvement. And we kind of don't put as much emphasis on developing those influence and relational social skills, for us. And if you're stepping into a management role, the same thing. We focus, or, a lot of management training is on how are you doing, the budget report, which is important, and all these other things, but we're not like, how are you bringing a team along? How are you getting the buy-in? How are you doing the influence? So we need to put some emphasis on these social and relational influence skills that will really help you move from whatever technical expertise you have to truly a transformational change leader in your organization, whether or not that's your, sort of title or just an informal role that you have. And so the Katalyst acronym represents 8 competencies, which I will talk about a few in details, but knowledgeable business expert, analytical systems thinker, tactical strategic aligner, astute political navigator, lifelong learning enthusiast, a yes-minded persuader, a skillful facilitator, and a transformational coaching leader. And you can learn more, again, at the download and do your own self-reflection and self-assessment as well. So each of these has so much richness to it, and we're going to go into detail into 3 of them. But for a little bit of highlight of these 8 competencies, a knowledgeable business expert is someone who fluently speaks the language of business, and that's business whether or not you're working in a government agency, a nonprofit, healthcare, or a for-profit. It's about what are the results that organization needs, and then connecting the dots between your continuous improvement expertise and those results. An analytical systems thinker is someone who sees the organization as an interconnected system, not just isolated silos or departments or functional sort of improvement areas, and uses this perspective to solve challenges at the level of cause. So it's also using root cause analytical problem-solving skills across the system. A tactical strategic aligner, again, aligns initiatives with organizations' mission, vision, and value, and also is able to articulate how a culture of continuous improvement will support those goals. So not just like, oh, we need to, be lean, but how is lean going to leverage our ability to fulfill our mission, vision, and values and the strategies to get there? An astute political navigator is someone who can navigate a complex political environment, and all organizations have politics. If we have humans, we have politics to build coalitions of support and influence decision makers. A lifelong learning enthusiast, and I like to consider myself a learning enthusiast, is committed to continuous learning and improvement, open to feedback, reflects and adjusts your approach of what you've learned. And you are all learning enthusiasts because you've signed up for a webinar, for a session here at the Results of Washington event, and you're committed to your ongoing learning. So how can you use that and leverage your own passion for learning to help others grow and learn along the way too? A yes-minded persuader uses persuasive language, compelling arguments, active listening, and empathy to influence others to adopt new ways of thinking and working. And this is truly how you get the buy-in. So many of those words in there around how do you get buy-in. So this is so critical for that. A skillful facilitator is someone who effectively facilitates, so helps bring people along in organizational meetings, training programs, workshops that engages and achieves the desired outcomes. I just had a podcast episode where I talked about how you can become a more skillful facilitator. So go back and listen to that. It's about how you make it easier for people in whatever environment to get from point A to point B. And then a transformational coaching leader is one of the skills that we focus on the most when we're talking about how do we help create an organization filled with problem solvers. We focus a lot on the coaching skills you need to coach and mentor and develop others to improve their leadership skills, their problem solving skills, and to inspire and motivate teams and manage change and lead by example. So some of these are a little more common for us when we're talking about how we're going to create, build those social competencies, especially that how do you coach more effectively, how maybe you facilitate, and of course, how are you a learning enthusiast and have this mindset of learning and problem solving. And there are a few, and that was where I started as well. So when I was, in the early days, when I was focused on, leading process improvement initiatives in those first 6 years, I was really developing the coaching skills, the facilitation skills to lead these different events and improvement initiatives, and maybe some of the analytical systems thinking as well. But It was only later when I stepped into a broader leadership role and then working with a coach and then starting to see the interconnectedness of our human systems that I realized that we had some skills that we don't talk about so often in our world of continuous improvement and lean and process and excellence. And those are the three really critical influence skills that I want to dive in a little bit more today. So those are around being a knowledgeable business expert, an astute political navigator, and a yes-minded persuader. And of course, all of these are important, but these are ones that are just not as familiar to us in sort of the standard practice of talking about lean. So how about this? You're so excited, you love process improvement, and you're like, oh, we're going to do some 5S and we're going to do some value stream mapping and continuous improvement, and let's do an A3, or we need a kata or a kamishibai board, or let's implement Hoshin Kanri in an X matrix. What happens when you lead with all of these great ideas and technical processes and tools? Overwhelm. Yeah, overwhelm, confusion. Exactly. That's like, I was looking for pictures of like executives, male and female, but this is the one I love the most. Like, whoa, like, wow, what are you talking about? And there are a few reasons this is, yeah, everyone just checks out, have an allergic reaction, overwhelm, instant resistance. Yes, it's like, whoa, 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 not here. But that doesn't mean your ideas and your knowledge about how these improvement tools and techniques are going to help. It's that, one, when you speak in this jargon of lean or continuous improvement, leaders or other people who aren't familiar with that language might feel a little like, I don't know, dumb. Like if someone speaks another language, or like they're kind of embarrassed that they don't understand it. So you have this resistance because they don't understand what you're talking about, and they maybe feel a little foolish that they don't know those terms. So we need to get better about knowing in our back pocket we have all these technical skills that we know are going to make improvements, but we can't lead with that improvement noise. This is a phrase that my friend Rose Heathcote shared with me when we were talking last week. We were actually both in Santiago, Chile, with the Lean Summit there. And we were talking about the improvement noise that can really just put barriers up for leaders for really embracing lean and continuous improvement. So instead, how can you speak the language of business and results? So what do your leaders have ownership for in achieving? What are the outcomes and results? And then speak in simple terms about how improvements can actually align with what they need. And so this is when we're become a better, knowledgeable business expert. It's deeply understanding the business that you're functioning in, the organization you're functioning in, and connecting the dots between behaviors and process improvement to tangible business results. And this is a challenge I see often with a lot of continuous improvement practitioners and leaders, as that we're sometimes not able to describe the value of the work that we do outside of just the direct, like we're getting like cost cutting initiative, which we don't want to be seen of just doing. We don't want continuous improvement only to be seen as cutting costs. How are there other value? Of course, there are costs that can be cut out and improved, like that when we're eliminating waste. But how can you make the connection between changes in leadership behaviors that then drives improvements in employee performance, which also then improves process efficiency, which leads to better customer outcomes and engagement, and then that connects to better business results. So how can we better connect all of this together to really help executives and leaders understand the problems they need to solve, the results they need to get to, and then how all the lean and continuous improvement work can help you, and the behaviors they need to be adopting too will really lead to those results. So that's about knowledgeable business expert. And we'll talk about this a lot more in some podcast episodes with Karen Martin and Brad Toussaint as well. So I'll drop those in the chat later. Think about that. How about you? What are some challenges you have or some aha moments that you've had about this gap here? And you've already shared a little bit in the chat too about that resistance. All right. Politics. This is the big week for politics right now. What do you think of when you hear politics? Especially right now, you're probably thinking of the bad politics, all the fighting, the bad things, the behaviors, the finger pointing, all of that. But politics there can also be good politics. in organizations, or whether or not we're talking about our country or if we're talking about our organization, politics is about just understanding power dynamics and influence to understand who's really making decisions. And if we become a more astute political navigator, we can understand and implement that good politics, so not the infighting, the bad politics, is how you can better balance input and trade-offs from multiple perspectives. How can you do this thing called nemawashi, or tilling the soil? How do you know who are the real decision makers and making sure you're talking to them and getting their input? How do you make sure that you're not just presenting an idea, but you've gotten input of others? I love this term, nemawashi, tilling the soil, preparing a decision to be made because you've actually gotten the fingerprints of other people on it. They can hear their voice and perspective. The same thing with like A3 thinking. If you're familiar with that, A3 is just a size of paper, but it became the standard form and template for at Toyota for communicating, problem solving, for strategy and others. But it wasn't a template to just be filled out by one person. The process that made it effective, that we often forget, is the shopping it around and getting the fingerprints of lots of people's perspective on it. And this is how we can more effectively navigate those, change bad politics into good politics, by understanding those power dynamics and decision making. So how about you? What do you think about these concepts of politics as it relates to your organization? What is challenging for you about that? Yeah, time. Yeah, that's a big one. Time, knowing who the right person to talk to. Yep, knowing the layers, access to decision makers, for sure. So all these things are things we have to figure out how to navigate. But certainly time is the number one thing that stops us with so many things. But this is our problem, is that we feel like we don't have the time. So we jump to telling, we jump to not doing then tilling the soil. And it actually makes it harder in the long run to truly have good decisions and lead effective change. All right, so this leads us to this imbalance between telling and asking that we often have. And I call this, we need to break the telling habit, because we are so used to jumping in as being the expert with all the answers or telling everyone our ideas. And this is one of the challenges about going back to that word cloud. How do you get buy-in? And getting buy-in is not just about telling people what they need to do. It's about balancing using persuasive language. So you can be doing some telling, but how do you connect the dots by leveraging your knowledgeable business, connecting to the business results? How do you get that buy-in? By sharing information and giving evidence, but importantly, balancing that with active listening, asking questions, and showing empathy for the challenges other people face. And this will help then influence others to adopt new ways of thinking and working. It's not just telling them that what they need to do, but how do you bring them along on that journey and help them see, help them get the perspective that will then ultimately lead to that buy-in. And, I heard a lot that there's like resistance to change. Well, we all have resistance to change. It's asking and showing that empathy that the change is hard, and really helping people understand what are the results that they want or need for themselves or for their team or for the organization, and then helping unpack, with that kind of concept of how can we get to yes together, and find a solution so that you're bringing them along to buy-in. And often it's like, but I have the great answer. I know what the way is that we need to do it. And what's important sometimes to reflect on, is it more important for you to have the answer or tell the way, or to help create the conditions for someone else to understand or create their own result, not their own result, their own idea for what can happen. So again, how about you? How does that resonate for you about how this imbalance between telling and asking? So developing and learning organization, as we talked about, we need better balance between the technical problem solving skills and these influence skills, and how can we build those? And, for too long, as I said, we are focused much more on the technical side. We need to build the social side. But I also see this over pivot, like we swing so far the other way, that then when change leaders are in like continuous improvement practitioners or managers are learning the like skills around facilitation and coaching and how are we, all these open skills, like if being a yes-minded persuader, we like over pivot and forget to also that we have expertise on the technical side. So we don't want to only be asking open questions and letting other people, not, like trying to figure it out themselves. We have deep knowledge and expertise that we need to balance that with how we're bringing people along and influencing them as well. It's about creating the conditions for learning and finding this right tension between a challenge and the support, between the structure and the freedom to think. And how do we create this learning zone that allows others to, learn their way forward and create even better answers than what we might have thought of? And so I talk about this in a lot of leadership programs in different ways, that we have to navigate these leadership continuums, whether you're a practitioner of continuous improvement or a leader or manager. We have to balance between telling and asking about being the expert in whatever our field is or expert in continuous improvement, and coaching and developing and influencing others. We need a balance between the challenge, the results that are needed, and providing the support and the coaching and the facilitation skills to bring people along. And it's about knowing those business outcomes and people development can happen at the same time. It's not like we're only focused on one or the other, but really how do we bring all these together and be more intentional about how you're showing up. I love this phrase that my client Sean used, that he felt like he had a superpower now. He was like, and this is not the hero I was talking about before, but his power actually became in letting go of being the doer, and instead showing up and asking more questions and going to see and supporting his team. And he talked about how it was really challenging for him. He was actually the leader of operational excellence at a large biotech company. And Sean Carner is his name. And we talk about this in one of my podcast episodes. And he was assigned for 6 months to lead a team, an operational team that he didn't really know the work for. And he's like, I discovered, his sort of old habit would have been to go in and just sort of like try and do it or give all of his ideas and like kind of direct the work. But he realized he was more effective in showing up and asking questions and listening, getting that buy-in and allowing his team some time to experiment, but also doing some teaching and bringing in his technical skills as well to help guide them along the way. So how can you balance your technical skills by not always doing the doing, but by teaching and developing and creating the systems and structures that allow people who own the work to be solving problems? And again, this is about how we create a chain of learning together. We're both learners and leaders at the same time, connected together by not just the technical knowledge for problem solving, but how are we developing the human, people-oriented influence skills to grow and develop each other as well. So I want to have some time for questions, but I also have a few tips before we move into that. I have those resources that can help you. And again, reach out to me on LinkedIn or after this. I'd love to continue to have questions. And I have a podcast at the end of the month. And if you sign up for my newsletter or connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll be hearing about this. I want to ask your questions. So I may be inspired by some of the questions you asked today and put that into my podcast episode for the last one of the season. So we can be putting in our same technical problem solving skills around plan, do, study, adjust, or plan, do, check, act cycles that we apply for process improvement. This is just the continuous improvement cycle that we're familiar with, but also for personal improvement. And some of you may have seen this from me before. And I actually think that we should call the cycle study, adjust, plan, do, because we just tend to do plan, do, or just do, and we're not studying, reflecting, adjusting, and that's where the real learning happens. So to remind us that we need to start with reflection and understanding, what are your current habits? What are the kata or the routines that you show up with? How maybe are you the lion taking over the thinking and the problem solving? Or what are some of the relational skills, those influence skills that we've explored today that maybe you need to be developing? I encourage you to download that self-assessment and go through it and think about this in more deeply for yourself. What are the areas that might be helpful for you to be putting some focused improvement on? And then set a goal. What looks better for you? How can you improve in a certain area or a certain habit? And then what's your plan for practice? How are you going to make improvements? How are you actually going to practice and do it? and get some feedback, just like I had from Margie, my coach, and then keep reflecting and improving. And again, learning, we know this from the technical side, is just about the difference between what we expected to happen and what actually happened, and what are the reasons why there was a difference, and then what adjustments do we need to make. So by developing a habit of daily reflection, and this is about sort of the lifelong learning enthusiast skill as well, how can you continually be learning and improving yourself as well? This is a simple tool that could help you. And you could just be writing it down on a piece of paper or in a notebook or on your phone, whatever it is, but be putting intention to what impact do you want to have in your organization? Do you want to be stuck as the doer or in your role that you described, or how do you really step into much more of an organizational, transformational change leader? So what actions are you going to practice? What are you going to take? Or what steps are you going to take? What are you going to do that's going to be a little different? What do you expect to happen? And then what actually happened? And what do you learn? And what adjustments do you need to keep making? And this habit of daily reflection and intention setting can really help accelerate your own personal improvement, and is a way that you can help others too, once you've connected that dots on behaviors to business results, how to help the leaders that you work with also see the connection between their behaviors and what the results are that they want to see as well. Again, it's going back to this concept of intention. How can you align with purpose and the impact that you want to have, and make sure that your behaviors, your actions are truly aligned with that? And how do you balance and integrate the technical skills that you have around problem solving, continuous improvement, all the process improvement tools and techniques with the relational skills as well? And this is what sets you apart and is truly your superpower too. It's, if you just are focused on the relational, you could be in any role. Our role, our specialty is how do we integrate not just and leverage the technical side, but with the people side as well. So I also encourage you to take an intention pause, because you're going between meetings and home and work, and like, how do you remember how you want to show up in any one moment? So take an intention pause, and just, it can be like 5 seconds, like, okay, I'm going into this next meeting. What's my purpose, and what are the actions I want to take? What are the things I would really want to focus on doing effectively? And that will help accelerate your awareness of how you're showing up and help you stay grounded. Those of you who know me would know that I'm obsessed with these dolls from Japan. I discovered them from my kids' preschool class 10 years ago, and now I take people to the Daruma Temple in Japan. I'm actually going to be in Japan next week, leading a Japan study trip for 18 leaders around the world. And these dolls are weighted at the bottom. They're like little weeble wobbles. I can't do it as well on my hand, but they represent the Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And you fill in the doll's left eye when you have a goal or an intention you want to achieve. And then when you finally achieve it, you can write yourself, you can fill in the doll's other eye. And they're really they're really special little creatures that I love, and I have a very large collection from them behind here. But they also represent that perseverance and patience and knowledge that, like, setbacks are going to happen. We're going to have mistakes, challenges, we're going to fall down, but it's about getting up and learning your way forward. So I want you to set your intention and go back to the Menti meter, and we have 2 questions for you, and then we're going to go into questions, Q&A for about 7-8 minutes. But identify for yourself one skill you want to focus on to become a more effective change catalyst. And I will show those in the next, in a moment. And then the next word I have for you is, what one word describes your learning today? And I will show the answers here in a moment. So go to those Menti. What is one skill you're going to practice with intention to improve as a change catalyst in your organization? And what are one word that describes your learning? And please put those in the Menti so we can have the word cloud. So if we can drop that Menti into the chat, that would be great. And so I just want to say thank you. We're going to go to Q&A. For any of you interested in going to Japan, I have another trip in May. Reach out to learn more about that. And of course, I've actually been focused on exploring these change catalyst competencies in my conversations with other change leaders, as well as some solo episodes of myself. So go and listen into those, and you'll get a lot more information in there. So before we go to questions, I want to go to the Menti meter and show What are you going to practice with intention? And one moment, I have to pull this up to share the present mode. And then I will stop sharing. Here we go. The word cloud is coming up. All right. Our first one. Okay, so we have active listening, questions, patient, focus, active question. So many great things. So please put them in there. And then let's see. Can we do the next? Oh, and then go to one word that describes your learning today. We'll come back to that as we wrap up. So put in your one word that describes your learning, and we'll move to some questions then. Thank you everyone for being here, and please reach out to me on LinkedIn and other places. I'd love to actually have more of the dialogue as well. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for offering that. I really appreciate that. So we have several questions in the chat. I'm going to start with the one that says, so they're in the doer and they want to move more to being a coach and being that catalyst, but the people around them are not so interested in seeing that change in their role. So how do you address that when you're trying to expand and learn and grow and implement some of this stuff, but people have a resistance to you changing into that role?
That's a great, thank you for sharing that, because that's definitely can be a challenge. And if we were here in person, I'd want to ask a follow-up question to really hear an example of that. I guess one of the things I would say here is just even doing that. How do you just not tell people what you're doing, but actually just start demonstrating that? How do you keep asking more questions that are open? How are you helping just doing connecting the dots to like, what are those more system level business results that are needed? So how are you taking those skills and just starting to I guess, lead in that way by asking more questions, making sure that you're practicing that, the nemawashi of talking to people how are you identifying who the real influence decision makers are in your organization, and trying to get their ear, or finding an ally in your organization that maybe it's your boss or someone more senior. But how do you really start not just using your technical process improvement, but even just taking on some of these other skills and starting to grow sort of organically, even if it's not like your official role? So that's a great question, and love to dive into that more.
Right. And one quick question, how do you know you're asking the right questions?
I have, that's a topic I could spend the whole day on. The best, and I'd actually talk about how to break the telling habit in another of my podcast episodes, and some ways that you can learn to ask some better questions. But the best questions are the ones that are truly the ones that you're not trying to lead the witness to. So those open-ended what and how questions that don't assume an answer. So just there isn't like a perfect best question, but how do you use your technical process improvement knowledge to guide people through a problem solving process? Because we jump to solutions too much, and we do that as ourselves. We always, even as coaches, we want to like, what are you going to do? What are you going to try? So go through that process. Like, why is this what's important about solving this problem here? What should be happening? What's actually happening? What's the real problem you need to figure out, and really help people define problems and go through that problem solving process. So again, there's not the perfect question, but how do you ask more open-ended what and how questions, and how do you guide people through a true problem solving process without saying that that's necessarily what you're doing?
Yeah, thank you so much. And there were a few questions we weren't able to get to, so please take Katie up on our offer and engage with her on LinkedIn and continue the conversation.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you to you, Katie, for this amazing presentation. It would just hit home for so many people. I can tell by the chat and the questions and the comments that this was a really valuable presentation for people to hear. Thank you for bringing it to us and always being there for us. And let's take a look at this Mentimeter.
Yeah, I just wanted to see some of those words. So patience, listening, asking questions, focus, intention, pause. And again, I'd love to see your one word. That would be great too. So be sure to go back, and we'll share that with everyone afterwards. And I'll put them in the final slides. So it would be great to have that.
Wonderful.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. All right. Well, we hope to see you back at 3 o'clock, everyone. Goodbye, and take care.
Bye, everyone.